Hostile care package inbound.
Sometimes getting back to basics just feels basic. Black Ops Cold War's multiplayer aims to recapture what made the original Black Ops great by stripping back a lot of the mechanics that have been layered into the past several games. It is fun, largely due to the gunplay feeling solid and familiar and the heavy burst of nostalgia of each pull of the trigger, but it doesn't do too much to excite at launch, largely down to most of the new modes not quite hitting the mark and a general lack of content. I wonder if there's too much looking back going on in Cold War and not enough emphasis being placed on meaningful iteration, if not revolution. With longer time to kill, a visual step down when compared to last year's gorgeous Modern Warfare, and a return to simpler map designs, this year's Call of Duty multiplayer is somewhat of a backward step for the series. Having put well over 200 hours into Warzone and Modern Warfare's multiplayer over the last year, jumping into Cold War felt instantly different. The great feeling gunplay is there, as you'd expect from a Call of Duty, and it's smooth and responsive as well. The addition of a field of view slider to the console versions is also a very welcome inclusion. Not all of Cold War's design decisions strike me as improvements though. It's clear that efforts have been made to return to a more basic map design, especially when compared to Modern Warfare. I feel like Treyarch may have gone a bit too far in that direction. There are more subjective factors in play, like the longer time to kill, that are not quite to my personal taste. Thankfully, there are hardcore playlists as usual, so this sweetens the pill quite a bit for me and offers the option for everyone regardless of TTK preference. That's not to say when playing core modes there aren't quick kills to be had, with sniper rifles posing a significant threat. One well-placed shot to the head or upper torso is enough to secure a kill in Cold War, and while snipers aren't as prevalent as they were in the pre-release phases, they can still feel too dominant at times. These weapons, alongside the M16 and its satisfying burst fire, have been my choices at range, and I don't seem to be alone in that regard, as only a handful of weapons seem a viable competitive option at launch. Submachine guns are currently the king in multiplayer. In particular, the MP5 is so good in fact that it feels fruitless at times to choose any other loadout. Imbalance can always be expected at the start of a multiplayer meta cycle, but it's never a good sign when 9 out of 10 guns you run over on the floor are exactly the same. That's not to say I haven't been experimenting with different weapons though, and that's something I'd recommend to anyone playing on the PS5. The DualSense's adaptive triggers really do feel different with each gun you wield, and add an extra appreciated layer to the overall experience of a firefight. Cold War is at its best for me when it sticks to providing fast-paced action and satisfying gunplay on maps that mostly encourage a run and gun approach, and not trying to borrow from other more deliberately paced vehicle-heavy shooters like Battlefield. Ground War never appealed to me in Modern Warfare for these reasons, but the new 12v12 combined arms modes have grown on me the more time I've spent with them. It feels like these are the modes Treyarch wants people to play most, and many of Cold War's key systems really come into their own throughout, whether that be focusing on objectives to help build your score streaks, or indeed using those score streaks to help decimate the enemy team. Currently playable on 3 larger maps, the new Combined Arms has 2 versions, Domination and Assault, which both have you fighting for capture points to earn points, but on a slightly bigger scale. It's by no means revolutionary, but does allow for Treyarch to stretch its legs and build bigger and more interesting arenas. There's enough in the Combined Arms 12v12 modes to make them regularly enjoyable, although vehicles and in particular tanks do still remain overpowered, and a big issue unless you have multiple teammates wielding missile launchers. That seems a lot of coordination to ask of us when we're not playing with a team of our 11 closest friends. A swing and miss for me is the introduction of VIP Escort mode, a tactical departure from the norm, which requires a level of teamwork not often associated with COD multiplayer. One team member is designated as the titular VIP, and must make their way to one of the multiple extraction zones while their teammates protect them in order to win the round. It's not a mode I can say I enjoyed too much, partially because of all the flashbacks it caused in my mind to playing hostage in Rainbow Six Siege, a mode that incidentally is rarely ever played when compared to others in that game. Another big new addition is Fireteam Dirty Bomb, essentially a smaller scale version of Warzone's Plunder in which cash is replaced by uranium. 10 teams of 4 players battle it out to reach the top of the scoreboard by depositing the radioactive element in different bomb locations, detonating the dirty bombs, and of course getting kills. The problem is that none of it really comes together like it does in Warzone, and each round regularly ends up being a bit of a mess. I found it very hard to enjoy myself while playing Dirty Bomb, and more often than not just found myself returning to the familiar ground of Call of Duty modes I've been playing for well over a decade now, with staples such as Deathmatch, Kill Confirmed, and Search and Destroy still proving good, enduring fun. There's a reason these modes appear in every Call of Duty after all. Cold War launches with only 8 multiplayer maps, which isn't a lot, especially when compared to the 14 that the last Black Ops released with. This would be fine if Treyarch were leaning on the quality over quantity mantra, but sadly they fall short in both of these regards. A handful of maps are quite enjoyable though, the standout being Armada, a level consisting of 3 large ships between which you can swim, sail and zipline. It's expansive and allows for some great flanking manoeuvres, catering well for all types of players due to its tight points of contestation and multiple sniping positions. Meanwhile, Crossroads' snow-covered battleground has also provided some of my most memorable shootouts, and allows for many different playstyles where no one class of weapon can dominate. Of the smaller maps, Satellite is my pick of the bunch and stands alongside Armada as the most graphically impressive one, but on the whole, Cold War does look to be a significant visual downgrade when compared to Modern Warfare. Moscow is swamped with stern architecture and bountiful busts of Lenin. I enjoyed my time here as it felt the most classically Call of Duty, but felt it still suffered from similar issues to other maps. They just feel too empty at times, because they're almost too large for the 6v6 game modes they house. In my time with Cold War, I feel like I've spent far too long sprinting in circles around maps looking for enemies rather than firing my gun, which isn't the most enjoyable experience. No matter which map you're on, enemy visibility is pretty poor overall. Players hiding in a cartel shrubbery remains an issue despite the bushes receiving a trim, but more than that, it's just plain difficult to see enemies sometimes. The worst offender being Checkmate with its particularly dark shadowy corners, and airplane interiors providing just too many spots for campers to sit and wait for people to run by. Across all of Cold War's multiplayer maps, there are overarching issues that could do with updating. In general, they lack a little atmosphere and can do with some extra layers of sound design, and while the lack of ambient noise does aid on a gameplay level, allowing you to hear footsteps and enemy gunfire, it doesn't help in making each location feel unique and distinct from one another. There's a very thin line between a nostalgic experience and an archaic one, and it's a line that Cold War has not quite managed to balance on. It feels like an old school shooter at times, which sometimes feels great, but all too rarely, with simple map designs and underwhelming additions to playlists failing to hit the mark. If you're looking for a quick burst of fun multiplayer action, then there's just about enough here to keep you entertained for an evening or two, but there's not much more than that. With some weapon balancing on the way and hopefully more maps and modes available in the future, there'll be more to enjoy in Cold War's multiplayer. I just can't see it taking my time away from Modern Warfare or Warzone anytime soon. For more Call of Duty Black Ops Cold War, check out one of these videos, and for everything else, stick with IGN.